My name is Renee, and I've been called many things over the years. Creative by clients, reliable by strangers, and a disappointment by the woman who gave me life. I never used to believe that words could leave bruises, but the truth is, when they come from your own mother, they don't land on the skin. They settle somewhere deeper, in the softest part of you. That's what I carried with me as I stepped off the plane in Denpasar that July morning. Not a suitcase full of linen, not even the rolled-up blueprints I clutched like a second spine, but the weight of all the things my mother never said with kindness, and all the things she did say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Vivian, that's her name. Not Mom, not Mama, just Vivian. Even when I was a child, I never really called her anything else. She was the kind of woman who corrected your posture more than she kissed your forehead. She built an empire in the hills of Ubud, a sprawling luxury eco-resort carved into the rice terraces, where guests paid up to $1,200 a night to detox their grief with imported sound bowls and vegan bone broth. To her credit, she did it from scratch. Came here in the early 1990s with 2 suitcases and a vision board. Bought the land for pennies, married a German investor she later divorced, and then spun it all into gold. It's impressive. I'm not going to pretend it's not. But legacies, they're complicated things when you're not invited to be part of them. I hadn't been back in Bali in almost 3 years. Not since the Founders Gala, where she introduced me to her investors as my daughter. She's very artistic, helps with the plants. I had just completed the design for her floating yoga pavilion. That thing floats over the water like a lotus leaf, supported by curved teak beams and reclaimed driftwood from the north coast. It cost $480,000 to build, and I handled every detail. From the sourcing of the stone tiles to the way the morning light hits the bamboo blinds. She didn't mention that. So, no, I wasn't expecting a red carpet when I came back, but I thought, maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. I had something real to offer. For the past 2 years, I'd been developing a sustainable design, a new kind of retreat. Small-scale, soul-centered, zero emissions. 10 guest bungalows shaped like woven baskets, tucked gently into the hillside, built entirely with native materials. No imported bamboo, no fake green nonsense. Graywater irrigation, solar roofs, composting toilets, natural cooling systems. No cement, no concrete, no shortcuts, just integrity. I called it the offering. It wasn't just architecture, it was a philosophy, a thank you to the land, something I wished someone had said to me when I was young. And I had a vision. This retreat would sit on the North Ridge, about 6 acres of untouched land just above her 3rd spa property where the ridge meets the jungle. It was still quiet up there, still sacred. What she didn't know, not yet, was that I owned that land. My Uncle Wei had quietly put it in my name more than 20 years ago, tucked into a trust when I was 19. A protective gesture. He said he didn't like the way she talked about development, said the land had energy, and she didn't listen. At the time, I barely understood what he meant. But now I feel it in my bones. I arrived early in the morning. The air smelled like wet leaves and incense. Ketut picked me up at the airport, as always. He still called me Miss Renee, even though we used to play chess together on the back porch when I was a kid. He gave me a sad smile. One of those, I know how she is, kind of smiles. Vivian was waiting on the main veranda of her flagship resort. Still elegant, still controlled. She wore cream-colored linen, a pearl necklace, and her hair in a low bun that didn't move, even in the breeze. She looked up from her tablet and said, "You're early." "I wanted to beat the heat," I said. She poured coffee into 2 ceramic cups. "It's organic now, from the plantation we acquired in Munduk. Shade-grown, ethical. We paid 200% above market." I nodded. She always led with numbers when she was nervous. I unrolled the blueprints slowly, laying them flat on the teak table between us. The leather tube I carried them in had belonged to Uncle Wei. It still smelled faintly of camphor and lemongrass. "This," I said, "is my offering." She didn't speak right away, just glanced at the lines with narrowed eyes. "It's designed for the North Ridge," I said. "Minimal interference with the slope. Full alignment with the cardinal directions, solar-powered. Local construction teams only. I've already spoken with Pa Ari from the village council. They're interested. It would provide 45 new jobs, and I'd reinvest 20% of the profits into reforestation." Still no words, so I kept going. "I've done a full environmental impact study. The runoff channels preserve the natural water flow. No trees need to be cut down. In fact," she touched the paper lightly, "sweetheart." And I knew. The way her tone wrapped around the word, that soft, condescending edge, I knew it was coming. "You'll never understand legacy," she said, smiling that beautiful, brutal smile. "You don't even want a family." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, like a stone dropped in water, deep and still and unforgiving. I didn't say a word. Not about the fact that I do have a family, one she's never acknowledged. Not about Talia, who has stood by me for 6 years with more grace than I thought possible. Not about the queer youth program I run back in Seattle. Not about the blueprint in front of her, which held not just designs, but dreams I had watered for a decade. I just looked at her, and I thanked her for the coffee. I rolled the blueprints up with steady hands. It felt like rolling a shroud around something I'd just buried. Then I stood, and I walked. Past the koi pond I helped design when I was 26. Past the banyan tree where I buried my first drawing. Past the outdoor shower pavilion where she once told a guest, "Renee's more of a decorator than a designer." And then I kept walking. Off the resort grounds, past the private fence, into the jungle. There, in the shade, the tears came. Not fast, not loud, just a slow river behind the eyes. They caught in my throat like roots waiting for rain. And in that moment I thought to myself, legacy isn't about land. It's about what you plant in it. And I was just getting started. 3 months passed. Seattle turned to amber and smoke. One of those strange, modern autumns where the trees blaze and the skies burn with wildfires from 2 states over. Talia and I took long walks around Green Lake, holding coffee cups like anchors, talking about everything and nothing. I'd almost convinced myself it was over. That moment in Bali, that folded blueprint, that invisible cut beneath my ribs. Some wounds scab over when no one's looking. And then the email arrived. Not from her, of course. Vivian never handled things directly when it came to property or money. That was for lawyers and assistants. She was the kind of woman who hired someone to break up with her personal chef. The subject line read, "Lease renewal notice, Northern Ridge Lot." The message was curt. Polite in that surgical way corporate letters are. Per the terms of the rolling lease agreement initiated in 2010 between Ms. Vivian Leong and the Managing Trust for Parcel 11B, we are requesting confirmation of automatic renewal for an additional 10-year term. Terms of payment will remain as previously established. $1,200 annually, due upon renewal. $1,200 per year for 6 acres of fertile Balinese land. It was laughable, absurd, but also exactly what I remembered. Vivian had always treated that land like an afterthought, a placeholder, somewhere to eventually build something interesting, a potential location for her boutique aging-in-place resort, or maybe a luxury ayahuasca center for the trauma of the ultra-wealthy. She never loved the land. She leased it from me because it was convenient, because Uncle Wei had insisted, because in her mind, I owed her. But what she didn't know, what she had never cared to know, was that Uncle Wei didn't just lease the land to her in my name. He gave it to me, quietly, legally, irrevocably. It had taken years to understand the paperwork. When I was 19, he had me sign a trust agreement I barely read. Something about a cultural preservation clause, ecological stipulations, something mineral rights. I didn't care at the time. I was halfway into an architecture degree and mostly interested in who I was becoming. But after that email from her lawyer, I pulled it all out of the fireproof box in my studio, and I read every line. Uncle Wei, rest his gentle, stubborn soul, had been meticulous. The parcel was placed in my name through a private Balinese land trust, with full rights of ownership transferring at my 30th birthday. He'd done it after Vivian dismissed his concerns about overdevelopment. He was furious, I remembered, said she was trying to sell the spirit out of the soil. He died not long after that, stomach cancer that ate him fast and mean. But he made sure that piece of land would never become a playground for capital, that it would be protected, that I would be too. And now, 10 years into that lease, she'd expected it to quietly roll over, just like always. No discussion, no thank you, just a legal assumption of my silence. I could see the pattern as clear as a blueprint. She didn't ask. She never asked. I thought of that conversation on the veranda, her words replaying like a scratch in an old record. You don't even want a family. The bitterness rose in me like heat under skin. It wasn't just that she never saw me, it was that she refused to, unless I could be folded neatly into her narrative. The artistic daughter, the design assistant, the one who brought color but never structure. But this land? It had structure, and so did I. I called Pa Ari from the village council. We spoke for nearly an hour, in Bahasa I hadn't used in years, but still remembered in my bones. He remembered Uncle Wei, remembered the day they planted tamarind trees together on the southern slope. Said my uncle had been one of the last to care about the ancestral irrigation paths, the subac lines, that tourists never noticed, but elders still blessed. Do you know what you want to do? He asked. I looked out the window. Talia was planting daikon in the backyard, sleeves rolled up, her braid trailing down her back like a question mark. Yes, I said. I did. Over the next few weeks, I drafted a reply to her lawyer. I didn't send it. I rewrote it again and again, once in cold legalese, once in fury, once in grief. But nothing felt quite right. So I waited. I watched. I began sketching again. Not blueprints this time, just impressions. Roots, hills, temples in the mist. I let myself remember what it felt like to belong to the land instead of trying to own it. Meanwhile, emails from the legal team began to stack up. Polite nudges turned to formal requests. Please confirm your intentions regarding lease renewal. Our client assumes good faith continuation of existing terms. Pending lack of response, we will proceed with standard renewal protocol. Standard protocol. That was the thing about people like Vivian. They expected the world to respond to default settings. She'd built a life on auto-renewals of relationships, of power, of her own myth. But this time, the system had changed, and I held the deed. I contacted a notary in Denpasar, updated the trust address, drafted a non-renewal letter, clean and final. Then I paused. Because power, I've learned, is quiet when it's real. You don't need to shout when the ground beneath you is yours. Instead, I booked a ticket to Bali. Not for her, for the land, for myself, and for what was about to come next. When I step off the plane in Denpasar, the air is different. Not just humid, heavy, like the island remembers. Even before the taxi reaches Ubud, I can feel it pulling at me, the scent of rain and stone, the low hum of gamelan bells in the distance, the earth itself holding breath like a keeper of stories. Talia meets me at the villa. She's dressed in white linen and smiles like someone who knows when not to ask questions. "Did it feel like coming home?" she asks softly. I nod. But inside I think, I don't know if I was ever allowed to call it that. The next morning, we begin our walk. The same path I used to take as a teenager when I needed to vanish. The dirt trail runs along the northern edge of the rice paddies, framed by banana leaves and bougainvillea. It smells like wet earth and memories. With each step, the past returns in pieces. I remember the floating yoga pavilion, the one she shows off now in every magazine spread and resort brochure. She tells guests it was her vision, inspired by ancient temple architecture, she says. But it was me. I was 23, just back from Kyoto, obsessed with suspension design and sacred geometry. I sketched that entire platform on a napkin while she dismissed me at lunch for talking too much about cables. The week it was built, I overheard her tell a guest, a New York hedge fund manager, that I was just the decorator. Just. I'd stood there holding the original plans in my hands. She never corrected herself, not once. Now, as I stand at the edge of that same pavilion, vines curling up the beams like it's finally been claimed by nature, I feel the shame wash away, replaced by something wilder. Talia slips her hand into mine. "We have the meeting in an hour," she says. "You sure you want to do this?" I nod. It's time. We walk the long way, past the ceremonial banyan tree, the koi pond I dug when I was 15, the place where Uncle Wei once told me, "The land doesn't forget you, even when people do." And then we arrive. The collective's compound sits beyond the main village road, surrounded by bamboo groves and tucked between two small temples. Their name, Linkarjiwa, means circle of soul. It's not a company, it's a community. They're not developers, they're keepers. 6 of them meet us barefoot on the terrace. All different ages, all different genders. There's Dika, who speaks slowly and smiles like he can see your ancestors behind you. And Marisol, a Chilean herbalist with bright silver hair and hands stained from turmeric and dye. They offer us ginger tea and salted bananas. No contracts, no pitches, just a question. What would you want this land to feel like if no one was watching? I blink. Not. What's your asking price? Not. What's the zoning? But feeling. Intention. I take a deep breath. I want it to feel like it breathes, like it doesn't have to fight anymore, like it knows it's loved. They nod. Not performatively, not for show, but like people who have lived through rejection and returned anyway. Then they show us the plan. Not for a resort, not even for a retreat, but for a sanctuary, a rotating residency for LGBTQ+ artists and healers across Asia Pacific. No influencers, no branding, no spa packages, just space to create, to grieve, to be. Talia squeezes my hand. They don't offer millions. They don't have millions. But they offer something else. shared stewardship, a way to place the land in a conservation trust with community governance. I'd retain partial ownership, but the decisions would be made together. We'd turn the land into a living organism again, one that sings, not sells. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like a daughter trying to be forgiven. I feel like a woman rewriting a lineage. That night, we hold a small ritual under the banyan tree. It's nothing dramatic, just candles, woven offerings, and a bowl of water with frangipani floating on top. Each of us speaks a name. I say, Uncle Way. Talia says, every part of me that thought I wasn't enough. Marisol says something in Quechua. Dika places his hand over the soil. There are no fireworks, no omens, just the sense, the deep sense that the land is listening, and maybe, for once, choosing us back. The next day, I draft the final reply to Vivian's lawyer. I decline the lease renewal. No appeal, no negotiation. Then I add something else. A notice of sale. Not to a competitor, not to a luxury chain, but to the Linkar Jiwa Collective. Enclosed is the new deed. Conservation locked, legally binding, immutable. But before I hit send, I write a short note. Not for the lawyers, but for Vivian. By hand. In the same script I used when I was 12 and desperate to make her birthday cards perfect. You said I didn't understand family. I do now. It's the people who protect your truth, even when it's inconvenient, unprofitable, or queer, especially then. I seal the envelope with red wax, let it harden like a small final spell, and I breathe, because something is blooming, and it has nothing to do with her. The letter arrives at her office in a thick white envelope, the kind lawyers send when they want to be intimidating, when they want the seal to say serious, not sentimental. But tucked behind the formal notice, beneath the stamped denial and the revised deed transfer, is something far more dangerous than any legal clause. My note, written in my hand, pressed into cream stationery the same color as the orchids she used to braid into my hair, back when love was simple and I didn't know it came with conditions. You said I didn't understand family. I do now. It's the people who protect your truth, not the ones who ask you to erase it, especially not for business. I didn't expect silence. I expected rage, and she did not disappoint. By sundown the next day, I was receiving cryptic texts from mutual acquaintances. Have you seen what she posted? Is this about the land, or something deeper? You might want to call a PR friend. She didn't just go public. She performed. A 10-paragraph Instagram post, overlaid on a filtered photo of her standing barefoot by a waterfall, wrapped in a white sarong, framed in words like betrayal, devastated, and legacy destroyed by selfishness. She never used my name. She didn't have to. She spoke of her child who turned their back on generations of stewardship, of the queer Western ideologies that mocked sacred tradition, of a mother's heartbreak at being erased from her own lineage. The post had over 38,000 likes in 2 hours. Influencer yogis, wellness bloggers, and aging tech bros who'd once donated to her foundation commented in unison, "You gave her everything. No one appreciates sacrifice anymore. Blood is thicker." And then, something broke. It started with a single comment from a former staff member, someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Wayan. She used to braid frangipani into guest towels at the resort and taught me how to say terima kasih when I was 11. Her comment? She gave more than she had, but it was never enough. And then another. Kadek, who'd worked in maintenance for 20 years, wrote, "I watched Renee carry her mother's reputation like it was sacred, until it crushed her." And then the floodgates opened. former employees, quiet collaborators, old friends of the family, women who had been dismissed as helpers, assistants, junior partners, all started speaking, not with rage, but with witness. They told stories about unpaid overtime during resort expansion, about cultural advisors who were sidelined in favor of Western consultants, about how, when I came out, the staff were told not to mention it around VIPs, how Vivian once made a local priest bless the guest cottages after I visited, just in case energy lingered. And suddenly the story wasn't about legacy anymore. It was about control. And in that vacuum, the place where her curated image had reigned untouched, came a truth too loud to smother. She emailed me 3 days later, not to apologize, but to correct. "What you did was cruel," she wrote. "You've chosen outsiders over blood. You've humiliated me. This is not empowerment. This is revenge. No greeting, no signature, just punctuation like shards of glass, sharp, cold, meant to make me flinch." I didn't respond. I let the silence do what my words could not, stand its ground. Instead, I opened a folder titled Closure on my laptop, one I'd been quietly curating for years. In it, screenshots of ignored messages, designs I was never credited for, marketing campaigns I'd drafted that were later published under her name, voice notes she'd left after press events where she forgot I'd even attended, a timeline, a paper trail, a past. And I let it sit there, not to send, not to threaten, just to witness. Because sometimes closure isn't confrontation. It's documentation. It's knowing you're not crazy. It's remembering that your version of reality matters, even if it's never printed on glossy pages. Talia and I spent that evening on the veranda of the collective's compound. The stars were impossibly clear. She was carving soapstone pendants while I read old letters from Uncle Way. In one of them, dated almost 25 years ago, he'd written, "One day, you'll understand the difference between inheritance and wisdom. One is given, the other is earned." I folded the letter carefully and placed it beneath my cup of lemongrass tea. No more trying to win her approval, no more hoping for a softened word, a late embrace, a redemption arc scripted in my head. I had chosen something else, not a vendetta, a vow, to honor the land, to honor the people who saw me, and to build something not in spite of what she called me, a disappointment, but because of it. Because disappointment, when planted, can grow roots deeper than anyone expects. And when it blooms, it doesn't ask for applause, it just rises. The day Daughter Earth opened, the sun came early, not with the fury of high heat, but a gentle, expectant warmth, as if even the sky knew something was being reborn. There were no fireworks, no press releases, no ribbons strung between stone columns wrapped in imported gold leaf. Just a simple arc of banana fiber thread tied between two teakwood beams, hand-carved by a local sculptor who'd been laid off during the resort's expansion years ago and who now teaches art therapy here on Tuesdays. The name glowed in soft etching on a sign made of volcanic rock, Daughter Earth. No trademark symbol, no family crest. I stood barefoot on the earth I had once walked on in silence, linen brushing my ankles, my hands steady around the ceremonial blade made from folded steel and hibiscus wood. Talia stood beside me, her smile soft and steady, her eyes saying, "Now, do it now." I didn't rush. I let the moment stretch. I looked out at the small circle that had gathered, healers, educators, queer travelers who'd come not for escape, but for restoration. Uncle Way's old friend Maid was there, in a loose batik shirt, holding the prayer beads he'd used during his final blessing of the land. Behind them, no guests in luxury cabanas, no drone cameras buzzing overhead, just rice paddies and a quiet breeze that smelled of lemongrass and memory. I cut the ribbon, and with it, I severed a lineage of expectation. The retreat itself was nothing like my mother's version of paradise. No imported marble, no infinity pools built over desecrated springs, no menus stripped of local spices to appease Western palates. Instead, a communal kitchen designed in a spiral, mimicking the shape of a banyan root. Outdoor massage tables shaded by actual trees. Workshops run by trans herbalists, indigenous doulas, grief counselors, retired dancers, and women who had once been told they were too loud, too old, too queer, too much. And in every corner, touches of what I'd once only dared to dream. Vertical gardens grown from native stone, humming with bees. Rainwater-fed fountains that whispered instead of roared. A meditation deck built from the ruins of the yoga pavilion I had once designed, the same one she told guests a man from Milan had conceptualized. Now, people asked me questions. They listened when I spoke, not out of obligation, but curiosity, respect. Healing, it turns out, is not a grand event. It's 1,000 tiny permissions. I only told a few people about my mother's final message, the one she sent after the grand opening, after the posts and the comments and the dust had settled. The subject line read simply, "You won." The body of the email was short, too short to be real, almost like she hadn't meant to write it at all. "What you did was cruel. You've destroyed everything I built. For what? For some strange little commune in the jungle? You're not a visionary, Renee. You're just bitter." There was a time that would have broken me, a time I would have spiraled, rereading every line, looking for the sliver of approval beneath the scorn, hoping, bargaining, begging for just one sentence to hold on to. But I had changed. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I simply walked out to the back garden, the one we had planted just after construction, the one the locals jokingly called the Garden of Disappointment, after I'd told them the story. There, in raised beds shaped like crescent moons, grew turmeric, lavender, jasmine, wild ginger, and lemongrass. Nothing decorative, nothing ornamental, just medicine. I knelt by the bed of jasmine and pressed my hands into the soil. Talia joined me after a while, without a word. She handed me a woven basket and said, "For the guests tonight. You promised tea." And I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. Not because everything was perfect, but because it no longer had to be. Vivian's name still lives in the mouths of hotel tycoons and wellness influencers. Her empire hasn't collapsed, not completely. She still hosts retreats, still sits on the board of ecotourism panels, still gets invited to galas where women like her are applauded for their resilience, even when it comes at the cost of others. But here's the truth. No panel will say out loud, resilience means nothing if it's built on silence. And legacy? Legacy is not what you leave in brochures. It's what you leave in people. Now, years later, I sometimes lead the morning walks myself, not as the daughter of a resort queen, not as an architect of luxury, not even as a rebel, just Renee. We walk barefoot, always barefoot, through the hills and the wet stones, past the bamboo groves and the silent places where memory likes to linger. Sometimes I share the story, sometimes I don't. But when I do, and the guests gasp, "She really said that to you?" Or, "And she never apologized?" I smile, because healing doesn't need a sorry. It just needs truth and space. So, if you found something in this story, a piece of yourself, a breath you didn't know you were holding, or a seed you're ready to plant, do me a small favor, like the video if it stirred anything in you. Leave a comment, even a few words, about what you're reclaiming in your life. And don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories coming, and I promise they will honor your time, your heart, and your strength. Until next time, remember, disappointment can be a seed. Let it bloom